Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Water Commission for Thursday, April 17th. Can we get a roll call, please?
Commissioner Davis, Commissioner Young, Commissioner Cooney,
Here.
Vice Chair Keller,
Here.
Chair Snyder,
Here.
and Council Member Sneddon.
Here. Are there any changes to the agenda today?
Chair Snyder, there are no changes to the agenda.
Right. And is there any public comment at this time?
Chair Snyder, we have no speakers for public comment.
Okay, then let's move on to the consent items, items 5A and B.
So I just wanted to note on there, we do have the item for design services. It's an increase in contract for Gibraltar. We've been in this, I would say, 6-year back and forth with DSOD. This was kind of a fallout from the Orville issue. And so there are some questions coming up about our spillway. Given how much sediment is in there, I'm not terribly concerned, but we do have to chase this down, and we will likely be highly encouraged or forced by DSOD to implement some of these projects. So more to come on that. Once we have a better sense of what it's starting to look like, we'll come back to you. We have not set aside a significant amount of money for this, so we'll have to figure that out as well.
I move to approve the minutes and the recommendation on item 5B.
I'll second it.
Commissioner Cooney,
Yes.
Vice Chair Keller,
Yes.
Chair Snyder.
Yes. Right. Moving on to the administrative items, we'll start with 6A, water metering requirements for adaptive reuse projects.
Well, Chair Snyder, Commissioners, Council Liaison Sneddon, back again with adaptive reuse. This continues to be an evolving and high priority for the City Council. Specifically, when we went to Council with the last amendment for low income, we stepped into an interesting time when the Council had just directed Community Development to come back with ways to incentivize adaptive reuse. And so with that, there was some discussion about what we could do with metering. And as we'll see with the presentation, we've done quite a bit of work and think we come up with a good compromise that meets the council's goals, achieves what the developers are looking for as well, and still, I think, protects our scarce water supplies. And with that, I will turn it over to Katie Muntz to do the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Hagmark. Good morning, Chair Snyder, Commissioners, and Councilmember Sneddon. My name is Katie Munster, and I'm a Water Resources Specialist. Just a quick outline of our presentation today. I'll begin with an overview of what initiated this research into water metering requirements for adaptive reuse projects, and we'll go through the definition of adaptive reuse as well. We'll discuss the amendment that was recently approved by City Council that altered the metering requirements for 100% affordable adaptive reuse projects, and then we'll go through the new proposed metering options for adaptive reuse projects regardless of affordability. We'll continue with next steps for the initiative and then a recommendation for Water Commission, and we'll be looking for your input on these metering options for adaptive reuse projects. So as Mr. Hagmark mentioned, the consideration of metering options for adaptive reuse projects is a result of City Council's request. On January 14th, City Council requested that we look into these options for all adaptive reuse projects regardless of housing affordability designation. Community Development is working on an ordinance that will amend that would adopt development incentives for adaptive reuse projects, and we're trying to figure out how our water metering requirements can fit into this initiative. So per Community Development's proposed adaptive reuse ordinance, the definition of adaptive reuse is the retrofitting and repurposing of an existing building to create new residential units. Their definition also refers to a change in use. Title 30 of the City Municipal Code defines change in use as a change from one use classification to another. A change from one residential housing type to another residential housing type is not considered a change in use. So the key components here are that the commercial commercial use will be altered to residential use, and this will all be within the existing shell of the building. And this is community development's proposed definition, and no changes anticipated at present. So as I mentioned, City Council requested that staff review these metering options during the introduction of the ordinance that amended Section 14.08.150 of the Municipal Code. This ordinance was considered by Water Commission on November 21st, 2024. It was introduced at City Council on January 14th and then adopted by City Council on January 28th. This ordinance waived the individual city meter and private submetering requirements for the 100% affordable housing adaptive reuse projects. The purpose of this change was to make it easier to achieve affordable housing goals by increasing the flexibility and decreasing the cost for developing these projects, while still supporting our water efficiency goals. So now we're considering metering options for adaptive reuse projects regardless of affordability. It's important to note here that while individual metering and submetering were waived for the 100% affordable adaptive reuse projects, the proposed options for other adaptive reuse projects are more limited here. So just for some background, the city has a longstanding requirement that each new dwelling unit must be individually metered. This helps to promote water use efficiency. However, private submetering may be authorized if there are constraints in the right-of-way for those meters to fit. State law does govern the installation, maintenance, reading, and billing of submeters. The County of Santa Barbara Weights and Measures Division does inspect these submeters when they're first installed every 10 years, and if there are any complaints regarding the submeters. As Mr. Hagmark mentioned, staff did speak with several stakeholders regarding water metering. We spoke with other agencies, developers, an architect, property managers, and tenants about this. We confirmed that other agencies do allow private submetering. The City of Los Angeles does have a adaptive reuse ordinance, and they do require submetering for those change in use buildings. The City of San Luis Obispo is another example. Their multifamily residential buildings, anything over 5 dwelling units or more, does have private submetering as well. Land development applicants have advocated for private submetering. With increasing construction costs, they're looking for more incentives to make housing development more feasible for them. And allowing private submetering could reduce the costs of development and possibly provide an economic driver for these projects. And supporting these adaptive reuse projects could help to create more housing, which could possibly help alleviate the city's housing crisis.
May I ask a question? How much is the cost usually of having a private submeter? Just what are we talking about, roughly?
From the private vendors?
Yeah, I mean, whoever provides it, how much does it cost to actually have private submetering per unit so that we understand what they mean by saving costs?
So this is a great question, and I think it may have less to do with the meter as more to do with the plumbing. So with the private submetering option, they can put the submeter right outside of the dwelling unit, so they can have a main line that runs throughout the building and then just have a meter right before it goes into the unit, versus if they have a city meter behind the curb, they have to run piping all the way into each individual unit. So I think when it comes to adaptive reuse, that's the biggest challenge, is how to run all those individual lines in when typically there's just one service line already in the building.
Got it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because I think the meters themselves are $150 or something, so I don't think yeah.
Great. Staff reached out to housing developments already utilizing private submeters to ask how that's been going. We reached out to 6 developments with private submetering, and we received feedback from 3 properties that actually are using vendors for their private submetering. Staff found that a variety of vendors are being used. Actually, each of those 3 properties are each using a different vendor, which I thought was interesting. These submetering companies communicate, bill, and collect directly from their tenants. Property managers did report issues of submeter batteries dying and slow response from their vendor to fix these batteries with their service requests. One property manager did note that it is sometimes a challenge to collect from tenants, and therefore they would think it would be more convenient if the tenants could just pay the city directly. But overall, the property managers did share that they thought the submetering was working okay and overall had a positive experience with their vendor. We also reached out to tenants to learn more about their experience with it. Tenants shared that they are able to pay their bill, that they receive their bill from the company either via paper or an online portal. One tenant did share that they do receive email if there's high use. Another tenant shared feedback that when they first moved in, it was a little bit confusing getting an email from a third-party submetering company. It looked like spam to them. That was a challenge. But once they were set up, and there have been no issues for them with the submetering.
I had a question about the, so servicing the meters. You mentioned like if the battery's dead, then it's the responsibility, I guess, of the vendor to fix it. So does that have potential revenue impacts for the city, or is it like you're the owner is paying the main meter and this is just informational? Or how is that?
That's right. So the HOA or property owner is required to pay the city's master meter charges, and then it's up to them to collect from their tenants.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you. After researching and conducting outreach, staff have prepared 3 options for your review. Option 1 would allow private submetering for all eligible adaptive reuse projects per the eligibility requirements of the proposed ordinance from community development. So on this map here, you actually have a printout at the back of your packet, if that's easier to look at. But per community development's draft adaptive reuse ordinance, eligible projects are any adaptive reuse project that is meeting one of these 4 requirements. So it would either be converting an existing hotel, converting a historic resource, creating at least 50% affordable units, or located within the priority housing overlay. So the green shading on this map represents the priority housing overlay. And it's important to note that any project in the city where residential use is allowed could convert to housing. But if the project does not meet one of these 4 applicability requirements, they just would not receive the incentives of the ordinance, but they could still convert to housing. The blue shading here on this map illustrates the zones that do allow both multi-unit residential and non-residential uses. So these are areas where that adaptive reuse could occur. Option 1 would align with community development's eligibility requirements that will be proposed at Planning Commission. This would limit the scope of private submetering to projects meeting at least one of these 4 requirements, rather than any adaptive reuse project throughout the city. This does not necessarily preclude these projects from having private submetering. Private submetering could still be authorized if there are constraints in the right-of-way. It just would not be a guarantee, of course, right up front. Currently, developers do have to see if there is room in the right-of-way for the required meters. Instead, this change would always allow private submetering for the eligible adaptive reuse projects anyways. And it's important to note that many of these adaptive reuse projects have limited frontage. So as of right now, with our current ordinance, they are sometimes authorized to have private submetering anyways due to the right-of-way. But it is a risk for developers not knowing what will be required. So this option would help reduce that risk and provide more certainty to developers. Option 2 would allow private submetering.
Sorry, quick question. How soon along the development process do they know? So when is the risk known? You know, it should be fairly soon that they know that they don't have or they do have space. You know? So just understand also how significant that risk is.
As soon as we review a planning application, we look at the right-of-way and inform them. Yes, could be prior to the building permit process.
I'm curious, I saw hotels on here. So how do hotels currently, like hotel development, how does that currently work with water meters?
So a hotel currently has a master meter, just a normal hotel, so they're not, the individual units aren't. But as we've seen, that's a popular target right now for adaptive use, is to convert hotel rooms into small.
Oh, I see. Converting a hotel to residential. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Option 2 would allow private submetering for eligible adaptive reuse projects, but with a different proposed geography. Compared to option 1, those 3 applicability requirements, converting a hotel, converting a historic resource, or at least 50% affordable units, that would all remain. The proposed change here is that the 4th applicability requirement would be the central business district instead of the priority housing overlay. This map is also available at the back of your packet. The purple shading here illustrates the central business district, which is the focus of option 2 here. For comparison between options 1 and 2, community development is taking the priority housing overlay shown here on the left in option 1 to Planning Commission as the proposed geographic area for their adaptive reuse ordinance. Community development has proposed the central business district in December 2024, but Planning Commission wanted to expand that geography, and that's what resulted in the priority housing overlay option. So if we focus on the central business district, this could possibly limit the scope of private submetering. However, option 1 would allow us to align with the upcoming draft ordinance that will be presented at Planning Commission. And then option 3 is no proposed change. Private submetering would continue to be authorized if there are constraints in the right-of-way for those city meters. Regardless of which option is selected, it's important to note that existing water metering and efficiency requirements will remain otherwise. For example, the water efficient landscape standards will still be applicable, and any residential use will be metered separately from non-residential use, as are our current requirements. And while there is interest in metering every customer, staff are trying to find a compromise that could help support adaptive reuse, and we think that private submetering could be that solution. And developers have also expressed their support of private submetering for adaptive reuse projects as well. And I'll just go through some next steps for this initiative. Community development is leading this effort to incentivize adaptive reuse projects, and metering is just one component of this discussion. Community development will next be discussing the adaptive reuse ordinance with Planning Commission on May 8th, and we'll be sharing Water Commission's feedback from today with Planning Commission. And then community development will be taking this ordinance to City Council with the goal of adoption by the end of 2025. And Water Commission's feedback will also be shared with City Council. And for the recommendation, staff is recommending that Water Commission provide feedback on the proposed water metering options for adaptive reuse projects. So with that, thank you for your time, and I look forward to any questions and feedback. Thank you.
Is there a downside to the city for allowing the private metering? Like, why would you want to limit the scope of that? If it's like, if the idea is to allow more housing for people, right? Like, why would we, what would be the argument for, option 2 versus option 1? Or 3, right. Sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I could say is for option 1 is that it just be consistent with what community development is putting forward and not having something more restrictive. From a staff level, I don't know that it opens up some bigger issue for us outside of the submetering issue itself. It's, like I said, in most of these projects would probably qualify anyway for submetering, but this takes away the guesswork if someone's buying a building or looking at the project and trying to cost it out. This takes away one of those elements because they'll likely end up using, in a hotel, they'd probably just use all the plumbing that's there. If it's still fairly good shape, they'll just use it, and all they need to do is put in the meters at each of the units. Mm-hmm.
And I assume with these adaptive reuse projects that all the plumbing or all the fixtures and things are getting replaced for the most part, so then you're already going to be at the kind of efficient standard.
Yeah, the plumbing code dictates fixtures standards, toilet standards, all that's being already dictated, so they're all low flow devices. It's really just to, again, keep that relationship with people about their water, what it costs, and if there's leaks, because certainly multifamily has leaks too. It's not just a single family residential issue.
Well, and then my follow-up question to that was, how do you ensure that that private submetering stays functional? Like, okay, you check it when it's installed, and then over time, how do you ensure that residents continue to get that information?
So state law governs those submeters. That would be Senate Bill 7. So that's actually out of the purview of the city, but the County Weights and Measures Division does inspect those submeters, and they do so when it's installed every 10 years, and then also if there are any complaints is another, they're just another key player in this.
Thank you.
I think talked about this extensively, but the needs of the developer versus the needs of the HOA and whoever ends up owning the property, yes, I think they're all going to be, I wish the city did this. Sure. Because that long-term relationship, it's a lot of work to bill tenants, and then of course people don't pay, and what do you do? Like, we deal with that on a daily basis. But again, trying to make these projects work, this is kind of that compromise. And one of the areas that we're continuing to explore is just to what extent we require them to pass on information that we give them in their utility bill, program eligibilities, rebates, that kind of stuff, just messages about current water supply situation. And so I think that's an area that we're continuing to talk about, like, do we need to change what we require the property owner to do with their tenants on that? Because right now they are not required to. Some pass it along, some don't.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a feedback. I really want to commend you for coming up with a creative solution and addressing the Water Commission concerns about passing those costs on or over water usage if people weren't individually being billed. But then also, it's so rarely that we see feedback that both the property owners and the tenants had positive feedback. So I just really, I think that was an extra effort on your part to come up with this creative solution.
So option one, just to be clear, is the one that gives us the most coverage, right? Okay, I think that makes sense, yeah.
And aligns with Planning Commission, so I think that makes sense too. So there's no official decision on this? This is just giving our feedback, or?
Should we move to recommend option one?
I would
think
appreciate
so.
that. That would make it clear.
Yeah, I think it makes clear. I move to recommend option one.
I'll second.
Commissioner Cooney,
Yes.
Vice Chair Keller,
Yes.
and Chair Snyder.
Yes. I realized maybe before we did that, we should have asked about public comment, but is there any public comment on this issue?
I should have caught that. There is no public comment on this item.
Thank you. All right. Okay, well, moving on to item 6B, retroactive billing administrative policy.
Chair Snyder, let me kind of set the stage for this one before I turn it over. So I think any good organization has like clear policies related to activities, especially related to how we approach customers who, for whatever reason, have not been billed for services provided. This is an interesting for me because I kind of felt like it should go to the Finance Committee because it does touch water, wastewater, and solid waste. However, it was highly encouraged to, I think it's because they look to the Water Commission a lot. They wanted the Water Commission to take a look at this and provide some type of guidance or kind of consent to this before we take this to the city administrator. This is an internal policy. This kind of sets how we interact with customers who were not billed. And in particular, this is where the city is not at fault. It's not like the city forgot to bill them. This is a situation where the customer had a responsibility to let the city know that something had changed on their property. And so it's a very narrow band. The main, and we'll get into this, the main issue for us is a wastewater related issue, which we'll get into. Most of these things that come up have to do with solid waste. So just going to set the stage there. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Munster.
Thank you, Mr. Hagmark. Good morning again. My name is Katie Munster, and I'm a water resources specialist. Just an outline of our presentation today, I'll be discussing an overview of our utility billing and some instances that lead the city to recovering the cost of service. We'll go through the proposed administrative policy for retroactive billing, as well as the recommendation for Water Commission and any questions and feedback. So just as an overview, the city has a unitary billing system for water, sewer, and solid waste services. There are instances where customers may be receiving city service without payment. To clarify, this is not referring to a customer who has fallen behind on their bills. This is referring to a customer who has not been billed for that service, and they're still receiving that service. So for within water resources, these situations most often arise when the city only provides sewer service. So for example, if a customer receives water service from a neighboring agency and they activate their water service with that other agency, if they do not activate their city sewer account, they're discharging into the sewer system without payment. So this is our example situation here that we see.
How does that happen? Like you're on the border of service areas or? Okay.
There are about 5 accounts, so it's not very prevalent, but it does happen. And in this case, the city would reserve the right to recover the cost of service. It's also important to note that staff are working on procedures to help limit these instances by working more closely with neighboring agencies. So the city does reserve the right to recover these costs of service, but currently there is not a retroactive billing policy in place. Having a policy would help utility billing when they're contacting customers for payment, and it would be a more clear policy for customers to refer to if they have any questions or concerns. So,
Sorry, quick question. Are there any other examples? I mean, I understand the wastewater. Are there other examples where someone may be receiving a service? No. So we're talking about these, basically these ones. Okay. Good.
There are examples in solid waste, but I'm not up to speed on those. But I think there's similar where someone moves in and doesn't cancel service or doesn't start service, but somehow ends up with barrels that get picked up. But
Like you steal your neighbor's.
I don't know.
can
But
and
yeah,
put it on there.
I don't know exact scenarios there, but
Getting some ideas for later.
yeah. And just kind of give you an idea, like the Apple Grove neighborhood near the fairgrounds, that is in the county. So it's this weird little enclave within the city limits. And it is a Goleta water customer provided sewer service that we provide sewer service to.
Wild. I know it's not the sweetest.
These are these enclaves that we're talking about here, yeah. Next.
thank you. So without a current retroactive billing policy, the city attorney's office has helped draft this proposed policy for retroactive billing. This policy documents guidelines for the city to collect charges from customers who receive these services without payment. The scope of the policy is water, wastewater, and solid waste charges for a consistent approach across all city utilities. The policy allows for us to retroactively bill the customer from the start of service. However, that retroactive billing will not exceed 3 years of past monthly charges because of the statute of limitations. It limits that time period. If customers have concerns, the policy does allow for the customers to appeal to the finance director. Water, solid waste, and finance staff have all reviewed this draft policy drafted by the city attorney's office. And now this proposed policy will next be routed to the city administrator for approval. But we're presenting this today with Water Commission just in an effort to be transparent with the community about the city's administrative policy and for feedback as well. So with that, the staff is recommending that Water Commission review the administrative policy for retroactive billing prior to routing for approval by the city administrator. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you for your time.
Any questions or comments? No? Is there any public comment?
Chair Snyder, we have no speakers for public comment.
So is there an action to take here, or?
I'd appreciate an action. Yes.
So I move to recommend the proposed administrative policy for retroactive billing.
I'll second.
Commissioner Cooney,
Yes.
Vice Chair Keller,
Yes.
Chair Snyder.
Yes.
All right. Chair Cooney, just jumping into the Water Resources Manager's report. I don't know if there's any comments on the report here per se. Again,
What happened to the rain?
yes.
Whose job is that?
All right. We'll be coming back with our report on that. And a few little things to talk about. The rest of Gibraltar was like 1.2 feet from spilling, so close. However, we are doing a Gin Chow release, so that's a requirement that we have to release water downstream from Gibraltar. So anyway, it was closely coming in, going to fill and spill. We have, because we believe our winter has ended, we work with the waterfront who has divers. We sent those divers up to Gibraltar, and every year when the season's over, we stick little rags in the gates to seal them up so we don't lose precious water through the dam. So that happened this week. So, what else do we have? Revenues are on track. I always think it's a miracle at times. I know we do a lot of work to project, but a lot of it is weather dependent. And since it's been drier than normal, the water usage has been good for that. State water allocation, final allocation will be May 1st. Right now, it's sitting at 40%. I'm not sure. It ended up being a really good year. I think it's a normal year in Northern California. And I think we're somewhere around 50% here. We've been hitting our job fairs lately. We did Santa Barbara City College yesterday and Ventura College last week. And I'm probably with both of them. We got 40 to 50 people that came by our booth and got to tell them what we do and talk to them about it. A lot of kids this year asking about accounting. Well, okay. Yeah, we've got accounting jobs too. But it's so interesting. It's just every year you get kind of a different flavor. So, and then I understand there's a State Street job fair, which I think we're trying to make a presence there as well. Obviously, a lot of changes going on at the federal level, and for the most part, we're fairly immune, except when it comes to the Bureau of Reclamation. That's been our really big touch point, and unfortunately, that's been kind of sad to watch. We've had so many people take the early retirement package there, and I'd say it's at least 30% or more of their upper management folks who've been there for a long time. Some leaving to retire, some leaving because they don't want to be part of the chaos and want to find a more stable job. So,
Quick question on that. Does that affect decision-making locally?
yes. And that's what we're trying to get to the bottom. At this point, we don't even know who our contact is for the Cachuma project. The people who left didn't even, hey, I'm leaving. There wasn't any goodbyes. It was just, they're just gone. Yes. So very, very awkward, especially in an organization that really just has a lot of historical data and a lot of historical agreements. And so losing a lot of that institutional knowledge it's going to be rough. And so we've been working to try and create a relationship with them in this void and trying to figure out how to move forward. We're trying to be optimistic. Maybe there's some efficiencies that could come out of this. Maybe they can contract out some of the work that they've been trying to do internally, and it has been difficult to get work out of them. So anyway, I'm not trying to.
We don't have currently any projects that would affect us, no? They used to have some projects for replacing pipes and things like that.
We do.
We do?
Yes, the headworks at Bradbury Dam for Cachuma, the valve leaks. Basically, they can't close it right now. So we're doing a release downstream that's more than we need to do. And so we've been poking them to get their valve replaced, and again, trying to get action out of that organization right now is really tough. So yeah, and it's obviously we've got a Cachuma contract that has expired, and we're now working off of extensions, which is, it leads us kind of in limbo. So yeah, we do need a strong partner with USBR here, and so we're not the only ones though. We're in a big group, and I'm headed up to Monterey in May, hoping the Bureau offers the opportunity to meet with them. So kind of curious who's going to be across the table when we ask to meet. As of this week, though, all of their credit cards have been canceled, so we don't even know if they're going to be able to travel to the conference. So that'll be interesting.
Joshua, on that, I did have a question about, because I'll also be at the Aqua Conference on May 15th, which is when our next Water Commission meeting is.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to be there?
I am.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm meeting with
I don't know if there's an opportunity to try and shift that meeting, or if it just, or I won't be there, but.
Right, we can look into that. It's always tough to find
I know.
a
it's always
space
hard
and then
to open
find
up that
something
can
that
of
works.
worms.
But we can explore that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. And then the last item I have, and this was kind of exciting. As you know, we've been struggling with compensation of our operators for a long time. And we have what's called a reopener in our agreement with the treatment and patrol group. And we have reached a tentative agreement, which is fantastic to bring a lot of our folks up to market, which I'm really excited about. And as I understand it right now, it is headed to council on May 20th for their consideration. But really exciting to, I think, finally be in the market again. And
May 20th, you said, is when it's going to council.
yeah. In the meantime, I'm still trying to get HR here, but as I'd mentioned, the HR director's gone, and so is their soup manager. So they have been struggling to keep up with basic stuff. So as soon as I can get their attention, I would like them to come and speak to the Water Commission. But I think this TA is going to go. This agreement with the union could go a long ways to help with our recruitment retention issues.
Is that primarily where you kind of see the worst disparity? Is at the operator level?
Yes, yeah, we're some of these positions are 20+% below market, and so bringing those folks in, and of course, what's challenging with our operators and that is they feed into other elements, or so raising them, we have to raise these other positions to so it's. The union had requested 3 positions, but I think at the end of the day, it's probably 10 or 12 positions that are actually being brought to market. Yeah, so it's probably impacting 60 people of our 144. So it's a good group. Yeah, and definitely the lowest paid. That's what it's struggling. So I'm really pleased. So,
Exciting.
yes. And with that, I'm happy to field any questions you might have.
Thank you. First comment, very, very excited about that last piece of news. Thank you for your advocacy and leadership on that. There's a second slide after this one, and I just had a question about how to read it. I'm not sure I understand it. If you can just explain it.
Sure. So we've got new drawing here showing us how much we're expecting from each one of our supplies on the right, and then how much we've actually received to date from those supplies. So you can see state water and groundwater. We have all the groundwater wells turned off, and we have not taken any state water. We will be getting into this in more detail because we do actually have a pretty substantial amount of state water now, 1,700 acre feet, I think, in San Luis Reservoir. And then we'll be getting another 40% of our allocation, 1,500 acre feet. So we'll have a pretty good, and so we have been looking for opportunities to bank that water and or sell that water. And so those are ongoing conversations we're having, but we right now don't have anything to report out on that.
Thank you. And then just follow up. So is that expected at that point in time, or is that the expectation for the year, and that's where we are so far this water year?
The dotted line is where we are on the right graph, is where we are today. And the bar is what we expected to use this year, what we had had in our planning for this year.
For the whole year. So,
Yeah.
So if we get these reports over time, we'll see it filling. up.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then on the left, it's just I can't quite read it. That is.
Yeah, this is our total planned is on the left. Plan to date is how much we've used versus actual to date. So this is showing that our actual is less than what we plan to be using at this time. We're using a lot less Cachuma and a lot more Gibraltar than we had in our planning horizon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Is there any public comment?
Chair Snyder, we have no speakers for public comment on this item.
And then I just also wanted to confirm there's the community event for the Vic Trace Reservoir on May 1st, right?
Thank you so much for bringing that up. Yes, May 1st. Hoping we get a good turnout from the community. It'll be really our first engagement with the community in person on the Vic Trace project. And then we also have a virtual on May 7th.
Okay.
So 1 week later. Yeah,
It would be great to hear just very briefly, maybe in the water manager's report for the May meeting, or just how it went.
how it went. Yes. Yeah, I think that's great.
All right. Okay, well, if there's no other comments, then we'll go ahead and close out this meeting, and we will meet again for our meeting in May. Thank you all.
Thanks.